Good morning, ladies. Oh, I said earlier this week that I need to practice that. This is ladies. This is not guys or you people, or you know what I mean? Like, it's ladies. So I am practicing that for sure. Um, welcome. Welcome to In Search of Prosperity Sisterhood. I am so glad to be here and to have these women here by my side. Um, yeah, I'm just I'm just over the moon. So thank you all for being here, and those that join us on the replay, bring it on, because that's what this is about. Um, I'm finding new buttons, so hold on just a second. I should not have clicked that. Right? You have to like, yeah, it's just the thing. Um, you have to learn as you go. At least that's what I do. Like, I think um sometimes we can immerse ourselves too deep into the learning side of it and not enough into just like the shutting up and doing. Um, and so this is me shutting up and doing, and I'll learn some things later or as I go. If you don't already know me, like, that's how I roll. And if that's not your thing, cool. If it is, even better, like, bring it on. So this morning, I wanted to talk about listening to your heart and what that can mean for you in your life and business. And I made some notes. If you don't already know, I'm a notes girl. So notes it is. And then I'll just go off on tangents and do whatever I want. But I didn't want to define what it means. I want it to be open-ended for you. Like, what can this mean for you? Okay. So in the world today, we've just learned how to turn down the volume of our hearts. And in doing that, I really feel like we focus on lack versus abundance, if that makes sense. So when we're turning down the volume of our heart, God gave us that. Like, he put us here. And no matter like what we believe or don't, like, he put us here and he put that heart in our bodies. And if it wasn't like illuminating or radiating, that's the word I'm looking for, radiating abundance, like, what good is it? Right? So whatever your heart puts on you is actionable. And because it's actionable, we sometimes, if we shut it down, if we turn the volume down, if we don't do those things, and yet we could have because they're actionable, we sometimes let them pile up. And then in my experience, I let them pile up and then I let them define me. Well, like, how could I do that if I didn't do this? Right? And all those things, all those little things, all those things I let pile up and collect dust and not take action kept me from taking action today. Right? Like, the things I didn't do yesterday were keeping me from doing things today. And when that was brought to my attention, first, that's really cool. But second, we have this tendency as humans, and then I'm also the child of baby boomers, so I think this has something to do with it. We can get into that later. But I really feel like the second I learned that, I wanted to go back and do all those little things that were collecting dust in the corner, and I wanted to go back and make things right. But it's too late, and not in a bad way. It's just when we stop and act and are 100% in that moment and say yes to those things that our heart are telling us, we have that ability to to just then act in the present. Because if we go back, it doesn't have the same vigor. It doesn't have the same ooey gooey goodness. I don't know. I'm making, like, it doesn't have that same effect. Like if you went back and said, hey, I forgot your birthday 6 months ago, here's the card. Like that doesn't have the same effect as reaching out and saying, hey, how are you doing? I thought about you on your birthday, and then other things happen, but I'm thinking about you again today, and I wanted you to know that, right? Versus, like I was saying, going back and being more apologetic. So staying present, staying in that moment of, this is what my heart is saying, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to my notes here for a second. I have another story. In making my notes for this, I was brought back to my younger days in 4-H as a young girl in the Midwest. And I didn't take the time this morning to look it up, but they have a pledge, and it includes your hands, head, heart, and health. And all those things are part of that action, part of that creating a better world now, today, in the present, as your heart leads you. And it takes practice. So my encouragement to you ladies today is to just kind of turn up that volume just a little bit to where you become, to where you stop when it speaks, right? And all these little things, I'm going to list some things that I know have come up for myself that have come up for other people. Because they're small enough and actionable enough, they're shareable with each other, like relatable. That's maybe a better word. So here's my list. Buy the candy bar. Open the door. Offer your spot in line. Pick up the phone. Instantaneously say yes or instantaneously say no. What's your heart say when you're asked a question, right? Sometimes your heart knows best. Sometimes your heart already knows your boundaries that you're willing, in a not as present moment, to overlook or bypass. Send the invitation, even if you think maybe that person's not going to come, but hey, I thought about them and now they have to be on the list. And I'm a connector. So in my life and my business, I am always like, hey, you would really have a good conversation with so-and-so. Or, yeah, just connections. Connecting someone to someone or someone to something. In this group, we're going to do a lot of sharing of resources and book titles and whatever's. And maybe it's just a little lesson you learn from a book that connects to what we're talking about. But connection, I think that can be something where if your heart pings and says, hey, Brenda could really use this. Or, hey, Jody has that thing going on, right? And sometimes those connections, like you have, okay, here's the last step. You need to release it. So when you make that connection, when you open that door, when you say yes or no, you have to release it because that's what your heart said to do. Your heart didn't say, do this and then micromanage it, because that is not so doable, right? And your heart is telling you to do doable things. So releasing it is that final step, whatever it is. If you open the door and they don't say thank you, are you going to follow them? Like, right? Like, you have the ability to do the thing, but then it's theirs. Then it becomes the other person's, the other situations to do with what they want. And those little, your heart speaks in those little actions that can become big. But I really think the key to this is releasing it. And that's hard. Another note that I have is that you don't need to know. You just need the how. And the how, like the first one on my list was buy the candy bar. We all know how to buy a candy bar. Do we know why we need to buy that candy bar for that random stranger? No. But we know how to do it. Right? When I talk about this, I just kind of giggle to myself if you can't tell. If you can't tell, I'm just giggling inside. Like, because when this clicked for me, it became a game. It became fun. It's like, oh, really? That's what you want me to do? And then you just ask how, not why, because you'll never really figure out why. If you do, let me know, I guess, but it makes me giggle and it makes me giddy to know that we can take this power that we hold inside of ourselves that we were given, and we can create heaven on earth. We can create really good, cool things from a silly little candy bar, from saying yes or saying no to something, right? And sometimes you'll surprise yourself. One time I was asked to be on a podcast, and I'd never been on a podcast. I'd never been interviewed before. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember. And she asked me, and I said, well, that kind of scares me, and I've never done that before, so I probably should say yes. Like, sometimes you just have to say yes. And the same for no. Like, I've been reading, it's November, and I've been reading some trendy things about how this is November. You hear about like no shave, no whatever, but this trend is specifically on saying no in November. And I want to go deeper into that. We'll probably talk about that soon. But it just makes me think of that, like that is powerful. And if we take a quick answer, just snap our fingers, yes or no, in a small way, we're answering our heart. Because sometimes you don't know why you said yes or no, but the answer will reveal it later, right? And if you said no, then we go back to the whole, you don't need to know why, but how. So if you said yes or no to something, you just need to know how to navigate that. And sometimes that's revealed to you right away. And sometimes you're like, I need to mark my calendar, but I don't know what that means. Right? When we have the opportunity or the awareness to turn up the volume of our heart, that's stronger than a trend. That's stronger than pay for the person behind you because there's a cool hashtag that goes with that. Your heart is stronger than a trend because it's yours, and you create your own movement and your own wave around you that challenges other people to answer their heart. And as someone who has turned the volume up, and I'm talking to not only myself, but all of you ladies, as someone who has turned the volume up, the challenge is to allow other people to turn their volume up. I'm a Scorpio. I'm a control freak. And other things in life make you want to gain control as well. And so when we go back to the releasing part of this conversation, ooh, sometimes when we have to give the rest of that to somebody else, you think it's like this fragile little glass egg, right? That you're like handing off. And if they want to kick it like a football, that's up to them. And maybe that's what they needed to do with it, right? Maybe that's what they needed, because that little glass egg that you gave them represents something totally different to you than it does to them. And allowing other people and challenging other women to listen to their heart first before they listen to their obligations or the way they were raised, or whatever that situation might be. I mean, I look at my list and I look at opening the door. And I remember I used to be in sales, and one of my service drivers, so I would set up the contracts and then I'd pass it to the service department. One of my service drivers opened the door for somebody one day, and their reaction was, "Oh, did you think you had to open the door for me because I'm old and blah, blah, blah?" And it's like, what do you do with that? Right? You have to be your own person in that situation and say, well, I'm just opening a door. You can do with that what you want, right? And that's the beauty of this. And okay, so that was a little bit of a kind of a negative example, right? You being the one that opened the door and answered your prompting, and they obviously have turned the volume down on their heart, right? So at a higher level, that the women around you, allowing them that space and grace to turn up the volume of their heart. And that is what we were put here for. I just believe that. Like, we were put on here on this earth to challenge each other and grow. And sometimes it's standing in what you said. Growing up, or not growing up, I'm thinking of when I first moved out of the house and had my full-time job, but was playing at an art gallery. Every once in a while, I would just say, guys, I have to go. And luckily, the women around me were like, okay, go have fun, go do your thing, instead of peer pressuring me, why you have to stay, blah, 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 right? That listening to my heart and then having it validated by other women that were ahead of me in that journey, in that understanding of just listening to that and allowing me to hold on to it, or have conviction in it, have confidence in that. I really think that's where it's at. Like, being that woman who has been there, who has heard her heart say that and maybe not acted on it, and then hearing someone else say, hey guys, I have to go. And saying, yeah, girl, you go. I think that's our challenge today. Sometimes I like to leave with a challenge. So that's my challenge, is when you hear someone else validating their heart, listening to their heart, validate it with them and cheer them on, because that's what this group is about. And I guess I'll leave with, or close my little talk, my soapbox, my sisterhood session, where we're going to go into more of a discussion after this. But I'll close with these questions, because I think sometimes, because this is new to all of us, there's kind of live interactive podcast format. I I want to leave with some questions and then go into discussion, because I have a feeling that some people just kind of listen to this and leave if they're listening to a replay or something like that, or short on time. So the questions I want to leave to you are, do you have any examples, as we have dug into this, of when you've acted on your heart and maybe look back and been like, didn't see that one coming? Or second question being, when was the last time you listened to your heart? Or even heard, maybe even just heard your heart? Because we've talked a lot about listening and acting and doing all that, and I don't want you to feel bad for hearing it and not doing it, because we don't want to worry about the stuff that's collecting dust in the corner, because that'll go away when we be present and we act on our heart. So when was the last time you heard something from your heart? Just a quick example. When you usually get them, at least at the beginning of learning and growing in this, you kind of get them like in the shower, or when you're driving, or when you're a little more quiet. And then sometimes you hear your heart in all this chaos, and it's just quiet for 2 seconds, and it says, open that door. I'm sticking to that, open that door, on my list, right? So I'm curious, as we go into our discussion, when you're listening, or have you heard your heart lately? Have you acted on it? Have you listened to it? And I'm curious if you want to share. This is something I just made up just a second. Like, if it were on a volume of 0 to 10, even just asking this question, I'm like, there are times where it's on a 0 for me, and there are times where it's on a 12 for me. Like, that's a thing. Okay. So there's no right or wrong answer, and there's probably different answers, just like I said, because there are times where I'm focused on something completely different, or I have this task. I think tasks is where that gets me. But now that I've learned to turn it up, sometimes in the middle of a task, I'm like, oh, I haven't heard from Stacy in a while, right? Like, oh, random thought. And so I have to stop and make a note or something so I can get back to that task. But if we're talking about listening to our heart, acting on our heart, the volume of our heart, where's this all land for you guys? So now is the time where we have that interaction where we can speak up. We have a smaller group today, so chime in or raise your hand. Wave if you can't click your too many buttons, right? And I'll unmute you. I see Amber's driving, so like if you have something to say, Amber, just wave and I'll get you unmuted and all those things. And I just noticed that I don't have my fancy microphone plugged in, so I hope you guys could hear me pretty good and all the things. All right. Oh, I can only ask to unmute. Gotcha.
I got it. So hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I am driving across the state.
Yes.
So this was something, I mean, I think it's awesome that you're doing this, so good job. But also just kind of based on your discussion today, you know, something that's been kind of weighing on me is why I'm driving across the state right now. So the Associated School Boards of South Dakota board meeting is today, and I got put on that this year for the West River area, small schools. And it's been really hard because my kids are really struggling with why I'm gone quite a bit to go to these meetings and things. And I had to have this discussion with my oldest one, especially about, there's just certain things that you just feel like you need to do. And this is one of those things for me. I've been on our school board locally for 4 years, and there's just a lot going on that if we don't get people that really care where they need to be, it's going to be bad for our just everything to do with education. And we had to have that kind of frank discussion about there are certain things that you commit to and you have to do it. That was my feeling with this. Once I sat down and had that discussion with her and kind of explained it, even though as a 16-year-old, she doesn't really quite wrap her head around that yet, it made her a little more comfortable with, well, why is mom traveling? Why is mom gone? Instead she'll sometimes in a 16-year-old way ask me questions about it, and things like that. So I think it was kind of interesting listening to you talk about this, because it's kind of been weighing on me a little bit as to why I'm putting so much effort into something that's not like at home with my kids. So I appreciate that. I guess there's my little story to share, that sometimes you just have to say the yes and figure out how to go about it the rest of the way.
Love that, Amber. I love that. And you sat down and like you said, you sat down at her level and said, I kind of don't know why either, but this is also why, right? Like you have that, yep. I don't know why, but I do.
Yep. And for a 6-year-old to grasp that, it's a little difficult. But I think in the long run, it's a way to teach them. One thing I feel like that's missing with our younger generations is they don't understand why you just give your time and your effort without getting anything payment-wise in return. And I think it's important for my kids to see that, and that's why I live the life that I do. Is I do a lot of volunteering, but it's important for your kids to understand that volunteerism is what makes the world go round. So, I think there's a lot of lessons involved in that.
I agree. And it's really, if it's something you're passionate about and yet you're still like, I'm not home though, you do have to, you'll find those ways to positively justify it, right? Like you have that ability to say, okay, I'm doing this, maybe not for me, but for that greater vision. I really like that. Thank you, Amber. Thank you. I love it. Does anyone else have maybe an example of following their heart, or want to talk about the volume of their heart and I don't know, whatever?
Well, when you and I have had conversations, and you told me life and business coexist. Boy, isn't that the truth? And Amber, yeah, you bring your personal stuff, your family into that business, and you can't have it any other way, right? Mine, obviously, which Shaina, is I left my old location of the club. I was getting this overwhelming feeling of this is getting too expensive. I could get into some financial issues here at this location for the rent, what was happening, and the costs. And it was a very quick decision. I don't even know if Bill knew about it before. So that definitely was one. And then to have found another place where the cost is reasonable, the property manager is a sweetheart, and we've actually, gotten to be really good friends. What a difference that made. And that brought me into that new, better situation. Obviously the personal end is, my mom passed, and I went back. I had this overwhelming feeling that I needed to go see her. And I got to see her and we had a good time. And exactly 1 month later, she was gone. So there's a lot of heart stuff that goes on in our lives that that if we don't act on it, we could lose out, definitely. So yeah, those are my two examples, business and personal, but they're actually together. So yeah.
And I thank you, Brenda. Thank you for that, because I think once it's put on your heart, right? Like it was put on your heart, I need to move locations. And then it was put on your heart, so you acted on that. And then it was put on your heart to go see your mom. And then things aligned in your business and those started to roll. And then your mom passed away. And in that, you had that time to be there wherever it was, whether it was with your business or with your family. And you were able to separate them, but yet we're talking about the same timeline, right? Like, and it all kind of, the cool part about the timeline is that acting on your heart. You heard your heart say, hey, did you see this? Like on this line item on your budget or whatever it is, like it highlighted it or it, whatever that was, right? You stopped long enough to listen to that and shift your feet, right?
And if I would have not have switched locations, I could not have gone back. I would not have listened to that part. Right.
Yeah.
And I was concerned that when I left, Bill had to take over, and he doesn't like making smoothies. He just didn't really like it. And one of my customers said, be where your feet are. Just be where your feet are. And I'm going to make that sign, because if you always think about being somewhere else, why are you not where your feet are? So.
And vice versa. If you're thinking about that, why aren't your feet over there? Right? Like start walking. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much, because that goes to that presence. And when you're present, that volume is cranked full blast. Right? It says, yeah. The answer is then always yes, right? Like yeah. I love that. And we can, when you opened that space, when you said, all right, I gotta go, right? That opened up all these other things, the new location, the friendship that came from it, all those things. I remember you can always justify things. Like you can always say, yeah, like that makes sense to do this next thing. But somewhere in there, your heart said yes too. Your heart was already open to it. For example, my husband made a job change in 8 days this summer. And it was crazy, but he already had his feet in that direction, right? So he was already halfway there. So he did in 8 days what it takes people 8 years or 8 months or 8 weeks to do, right? Because his feet and heart were already on the other side of the fence, or however you want to phrase that. Does it cause chaos in all the other directions and areas? Yes, because the rest of you is still in that other space. And so when you leap into that, when the rest of you says yes, that's really cool, because most of it's already aligned. Your heart and your feet are already over there, right? Like what else do you have to bring? Oh my goodness. I love that very much. I love that. So if we go back to the little things, because those we just talked about some really big things. And I don't see any other hands being raised. So if we go back to the idea of creating heaven on earth, I've talked about this a couple times in the last year, and I just wonder if those little things, I don't know, I just want to talk about that more for whatever, like if I'm looking at all my list that I have in front of me, I kind of want to talk about more of that, like the little things. Sometimes I say you have to change it in your home first, right? Like if you're going to change the world, you have to change your home first. And so if you take that and go in the direction of, yeah, changing the world, creating that awesome space here on earth, what are some things that we can do, that we can encourage others to do, that will help us create that, lift that up, make that bigger, make the good stuff bigger? I think I talked about this a little bit in my closing about how it's a challenge, our challenge to encourage others to turn up their volumes, right? To affirm others in saying, hey guys, I gotta go. Or, hey, that was really nice of you to open that door, or whatever those things are. Affirming others, I think, is a big piece of that, because then it makes bigger what they acted on in their heart, right? I don't know. Maybe that's something we need to think about. All right. I think I'm going to leave it at that, ladies. I think, so I have some plans for this content. Okay, so I'm going to take this recording and learn how to edit new things all day, right? I opened with that, like, oh, all the new things. And I'm going to put this on our YouTube channel so that members can go back and listen to it, share it with other people that can be inspired, because there is a lot of value of being here live and being able to voice on those things as they come up for you in these discussions. And then I also have plans. This is probably in a couple months as I learn new things. I do have plans to bring these transcribed to the membership portal. And in there, we can deepen our discussion or go back and say, oh my gosh, this happened this week, and we talked about this 3 months ago, or whatever those things are, kind of more forum style. Because I really don't know, something about me is like, I don't want this to just be a Facebook group, another Facebook group, you know? Because there's things missing in that where I think we can be good with our words and, yeah, share it in that forum style. Yep. Yeah. All right, ladies, let's get back to work.
Okay. Thank you, Shaina.
Thank you all.